afternoon, everyone. This is a second of our panel. It sort of doves into the development panel because all we talked about is money and how to find it. This is a panel on gap funding. And I first want to thank Paramax Films. I want to thank GTV, SRG Accountants, Monde Crest, and Taylor Bird Clothing for providing me with some of my clothing. I want to also thank the Hyatt for providing the space. All right, so this is about funding, and everyone is looking about funding. So I want to introduce everyone. Strath Hamilton from Tri-Coast Worldwide, a very reputable sales and distribution company.
Hi.
And Fishman from Night Dove Pictures, who has found funding for her movies. And we have Martin Katz by Prospero Films, one of Canada's best. I want to say, well, even outside Canada, do we think he's okay? And there's Jonathan Bronfman from JoBro, who is going out and what was trained, he told me, by this gentleman, Martin Katz.
And now he's eclipsing.
And he's making Canadian films. Are there any questions before we? Okay, well, first introduce yourself. Jonathan, start there.
Sure, yeah, I'm Jonathan. I'm based here. I worked for Marty for about 3 years, and he taught me too much, so I ended up starting my own production company, and following in his footsteps, we had some early successes, and it's been a snowball from there. I also have I have a visual effects service company called Intelligent Creatures, which I'm partnered at. So we provide visual effects service work for film and television.
I'm just going to jump in and say, when Jonathan says he had some early successes, Jonathan's the producer of The Witch. The Witch is a movie made for $3.5 million, did $108 million.
68.
68. 108.
108.
International?
Yeah, no, I executive produced it, and it was a great experience. And
Okay.
we worked with good partners and. good
Either way you
people
do the
whole-
math, it works out relatively
You
positive.
should just admit the success we
It
got.
was
is what
good.
he said.
It was,
Go with
we
the
did well.
160.
It was a good experience.
Okay, Martin.
And when you say, Corky, that we do, that Jonathan or I do Canadian productions, it's sort of true. But what the interesting thing, the key that I developed at Prospero Pictures, which I developed before that at Grosvenor Park for 5 years, is to bring international co-production financing to independent film.
Yes.
So the opportunity is to bring financing from our home country, which is Canada, and financing from another country, whether it's the US or the UK or Germany or France, and combine them on the same negative so that you can create a film that you can sell at home and you can sell in one other territory. And the real key there is not just selling it, but overselling it. When you have a national film, Canadian distributors tend to overpay for it. That is, they tend to pay more because it's a national film than they would if it were an American film or Swedish film or a South African film or whatever else it might be. Sometimes that's because they broadcast quotas increase the value of the film for paid television or free television. Sometimes it's for other reasons. And of course, wherever you go in the world, in France, they'll pay more for a French film, generally speaking. In Germany, they'll pay more for a German film. So if you can make a film that's worth more than its stock value in Canada and in Germany at the same time, you're well on your way to financing the film because you've oversold it in major territories. And that's I probably shouldn't give away the secret.
You
Now
taught
you-
me. You taught
okay.
me. I didn't want to
Okay.
teach everyone else. But.
So you forget all that. Forget all that. Don't do that.
Anne, how did you find financing and tell everyone about you?
Okay, hi, I'm Ann Fishman. So I'm an attorney. I like to write. I started writing 10 years ago. And long story short, as good as I thought my scripts were, I found it wasn't so easy to just march into LA. I wasn't moving to LA with the kids overnight. They were not, it is very difficult to break into this business. You can be good, but I have found, first of all, you have to be great. The people in this business are really smart, very dedicated. It's very tough to break in. And I just decided I am going to produce my own films at this point. So the first two films I did They're in distribution. One has just been sold to China. I wish for more money, but the Chinese are very good negotiators. So that's not a great windfall, but I am extremely happy about it. And I want to circle back to that because I think there's an important point. What worked for me, I had some private investors, but it was and thanks to Corky, this exists, the Internal Revenue Code, Section 181. If it's a 75% the production is in the United States, under 15 million, there's an accelerated depreciation that, long story short, gives the investors their money back right away to the extent of what their tax liability would have been. And that's not really a tax credit, but what it does is you can say, you're getting your money back. You know, you will, and I actually got quite a bit of money back. I actually had to teach my accountant about it. He didn't believe me. It works, proof of concept. So that was a way to help for me to get investors and mitigate the losses for myself. So I really believe in it. I'd love to hear from Corky what I've grandfathered 2 films in because now it's expired, and I think that's a loss. I'm at a point now, so I'm just going to be quick. You know, I did then another film, and I got investors. I also put money in. I live in Florida. This is very important. In the United States, we do, as Corky said, have states that then give a credit back, and that could be
Sometimes a rebate, too.
right. So you have the federal, and Corky's going to tell us how to, get them to extend it or how to utilize that now going forward. And you also have, it's usually between 20 and 30% from the different states. They have different threshold requirements. Sometimes you can get a broker to monetize it for you. They take a piece of it and they can give you the money up front. So I think those things are very
Florida has a
important.
state tax credit?
So Florida had a wonderful
Florida
one.
has
It no longer.
personal-
Right.
Right, but I'm talking about the film tax credit that the different states have, like
I understand what
Georgia.
you're saying.
Okay.
But Florida doesn't
Florida
have
pays
it.
So
for it if you
when
don't actually
I
have
did,
taxes.
so my first film is a documentary, and most of the filming was done out of the country. It wasn't going to work. The second was Florida, but the tax credit just had been dried up, and I made a decision to make my third film, which I filmed last year. It's just completed. I was actually on the phone with the Massachusetts tax people because I loved the program, but this was the calculation. Nothing is just simple. I have a great crew, and that's part of my secret sauce. In other words, we can make a great project. We have a workflow, we wheel and deal together, it works. And I would have had to fly them all up to Massachusetts as opposed to being home and not having that expense. So sometimes it's not so straightforward. But between the federal tax credit, if you can find a project that's been grandfathered in, or he can tell you how to make it work for you, and the state programs, that is one piece. And then you usually need private equity, and you have to offer, like Corky was saying, I also did this. I think I'm offering 125%, meaning once the expenses are paid, the investors are going to get 100% back, plus 20%, 30%, and then they own, forever a piece of the net profit. The other way, and this is, I think, important, and it's really part of your finance plan. If you have a worthy project, you need that. If you can attach some actors and you can't pay them what they are really worth, you give them points on the back end. And to me, that's part of your finance plan. You're basically deferring. You don't really I guess that's deferred compensation. And that's how you also attract good name actors to a smaller project. You give them money out of the net profits.
Okay, thank you.
Strath Hamilton. I'm one of the owners of a distribution company in Los Angeles, Tricoast Worldwide. Some of our partners are Sony Pictures executives. I've been in the business for more than 30 years. I started as a filmmaker, directed a dozen movies for the studios and independents. And I just always was attracted to the marketing and the selling of movies. I think producing movies is a wonderful pastime, but it's become less of a business as we move forward. And I think you have to be committed to the art of what you're doing if you're a filmmaker, because the Financial returns are not as secure as they were even 2 years ago. The business is in a certain amount of flux and chaos. So I want to make sure for all of the people here who are making films that you're not just doing it to make money, that you're doing it because you love films, you love the subject matter that you're doing. You know, there's a old Sigmund Freud theory that it's not the end of the road, it's the journey that you're on that really matters. It can be the most wonderful thing in the world to make a film.
Wow.
But, you know, that's it for
Sign
me.
me up.
So you make me think, Strath, of my movie, The Journey is the Destination,
Right, yeah.
which was a gala here at TIFF 12 months ago almost today, and is in distribution now. We have a few things we're announcing very shortly. We've been to about 7 festivals. We won about 8 awards. So it's actually done very well. It, bizarrely enough, is called The Journey is the Destination. And it was a long, arduous process getting it made. But the thing that really put us over the top, we did have tax credits, not from South Africa, that helped us finance the movie. We also had private equity that helped us finance the movie. But the most important thing is we had a home for the movie. So we had one of the great sales agents in the world, Nick Chartier at Voltage Pictures, who fell in love with the movie and said, let's get this made. This is an important movie to make. It's a great movie to make. So he helped us get it made. And I think it's obviously important to have all of those other elements and the passion and the story that's going to make people pay attention. But it's also important for the movie to have a home. And I think that's when we talk about sales agents for independent producers. That's your home. That's who you're making the movie for.
But I want to go back, Martin. You talked about when you go out to try and find funding and put the pieces of the puzzle together. You mentioned some of the countries that are not the United States, and you included the United States. I mean, as people know, we aren't a signatory to any treaties.
And the treaties you are signatory to, you seem to want to tear up, which is
well, but that's a political statement.
Kind of
that's
bullshitty.
that's a political statement.
I don't want to get into it.
Okay, so let's
You don't have to get into it right away. Maybe later we can get into it.
Jonathan and I had a conversation about that the other day. We aren't part of a treaty because all your treaties came into existence because Hollywood, when there was a Hollywood. There's no Hollywood anymore. I mean, there are no studios that are actively funding movies. So when we came up with a federal incentive in the United States, which you talked about, which was called 181, and it really gave relief to taxpayers in the United States, company or individual, if they invested up to $15 million per picture, and it could go to 20 if there's certain circumstances, and 15 or 20 million per episode for television, up to 44. And it really provided a way that we could do it. But what we had provided, 25% could be spent in any country. So we were pigging back with Canada, with all those countries that for our 25% on a 10 million, we could spend 2.5 million and still qualify in a country that gave us a further kick. Pardon?
There is a question on internet.
Okay, go ahead.
So they ask, what is the percentage in a movie made by a sales agent in a funding plan?
So
what was that question?
What's the percentage of a sales agent made in the financing plan? I think the question is what percentage can a sales agent put in, contribute to the financing plan? So in my film, for example, it was about 20%, which is pretty good. Okay. I wouldn't say I would not expect to see more than 20%, maybe 10%. Also a good thing.
We'll put 100% in if it's the right movie. Well, it's just about what elements you have that are assets that we know that we can resell. So we have great partnerships with South America, Germany, UK, and if it's an actor that we know is trackable in what they've earned, we provide a kind of wrap service to wrap the tax credits, we wrap the equity, we wrap any pre-sales that we do so that the filmmakers can come to our company, and then go make the movie.
And at what stage does a filmmaker come to you? Does anybody come in development stage to get that 20% or that 100%?
I actually think that's a bad idea.
Right.
Because you're not really a producer unless you've attached an asset that is something I can't get by just picking up the phone, calling, an agent or something.
Asset
As in, can,
No. A talent. So, for example, if you say, I got Jake Gyllenhaal to want to be in my movie, and you go to him and he said, well, that's not good enough because I can pick up the phone and I can get Jake. It's not as valuable of an asset to him as you. So,
but if you come to me and say I can get Jake Gyllenhaal for scale because he's a friend of mine,
then that's a different story.
I'm paying $6 million. I'm
Okay,
paying
So
attention.
what do you need for a filmmaker to come to you?
Well, first of all, I think that there's many different. The word filmmaker to me is in a little bit of misnomer because I believe producers are filmmakers as well. If you have a director that has track record, it's all about these days what can be tracked. What success has the director had? What success has the producer had? If you don't have those elements to start with, then I would suggest a literary property that has a track record. Come in with something.
a book.
Yeah, a book, a television show that you can adapt, some characters that have some kind of branding. So if you're not the brand as a producer or the director, you don't have a big actor, get something that people know. Because the marketplace is littered right now with movies that have no movie stars, no literary background, and it's so desperately hard to promote them.
So you think about we talk about the package. What's the package? The package is the script, which has a genre, right? So it's either a good or bad script. That's given. Let's assume it's a great script. Now the question is, what is the genre of the script? Is it a romantic comedy? Is it a haunted house movie? Is it elevated genre, which everyone is looking for now? So as genre film, a horror thriller film, but with a twist that you didn't see coming. And then who's the director and who's the talent? That's the package. So if you come and say, my son wrote this great script, it's really, really good, you should read it, that's not much of a package, right? If you say, my son wrote this script and Jake Gyllenhaal's my cousin and he's promised to be in it, suddenly it's a package. Suddenly I don't care who's directing it that much, but it'd actually be good to know.
Look,
right?
and
Nothing wrong with Jake, I like Jake.
And if the talent has a foreign agent or manager, call the foreign agent or manager. Forget the United States agent or manager because they want to hear from you. They don't get the calls usually about the talent. I got a very major talent, which I won't name here, simply because I called her foreign agent, who said,
British or French agent.
who said, oh my God, we'd love to be part. Then they're going to call the American people and say, we're doing this. And so again, if you've got the luxury of talent that's got foreign representation, start with the foreign. Forget the United States, because they're always going to say, do you got money? The foreign people are going to say, tell me about the project. It's a whole different
I agree, totally agree.
dynamic. I mean, Jonathan.
There's a question there.
Okay, yeah.
I was just going to, since I think it's relative to what we're talking about right now, can we use The Witch as a case study maybe here? Because in a way, The Witch didn't, I don't think it was based on any prior IP, or was it?
No, it wasn't. He used source materials, but
Based on those letters, though.
it was based loosely on transcripts from the Salem witch trials, and
But it
he
wasn't a
studied
known
the.
piece of IP.
No, it wasn't a specific piece of underlying property.
So just, how did that come about? Maybe, in relation to what everybody's talking about here, does it fit into the conversation?
Well, the witch is different in that Robert Eggers, the writer and director, was American, so it falls a little bit outside of what we're talking about in that you can heavily subsidize a project's financing by going through the international co-production route. In this instance, there were unique circumstances, and in any project, there are unique circumstances. So for this particular one, they wanted to shoot in a particular location that looked the way it did. Northern Ontario suited their needs. There was a regional grant in Northern Ontario that wasn't specific to it being a Canadian content or international co-production film, so they're really a labor-based fund. If you show them you're spending the money up there, you could receive the grant. And so we received that grant along with a Canadian distribution deal and the tax credits, Canada ended up actually bringing more than half, about 60% of the financing. So to Marty's point and to Strath's point, in any instance when you're acquiring 100%, you're using these subsidies and these grants to leverage getting a deal with an international agent or a buyer, because your financial viability is enhanced tremendously. So every particular project, every particular project has its own circumstance that allows it to be viable.
When you say the real saleability of The Witch was excitement for Eggers.
Well, and that's right.
So
And
he
so
was the first feature?
it was the first feature.
But he had this amazing body of work.
And he had developed it at the Sundance Catalyst program, which is also where the director-writer from a film I just did called Patty Cakes came from. And so if you think about Sundance, these guys are curating films, thousands of films, if not tens of thousands of filmmakers, then narrowing it down to hundreds, and then bringing those hundreds in and interviewing them and studying their work and using the greatest film minds in the world to help evaluate which filmmakers are the ones that they want to select, and then they narrow it down to like this 10-person group, and that's the Catalyst program.
I mean, Sundance Institute has a writer's lab, which is an amazing thing to be part of, because if you submit your writings to the Sundance Institute and they pick you to be one of those select people to be part of their lab, they have people that work with you on a steady basis and to develop your project. And those projects that come out of the lab as the final project, almost every one of them gets picked up because
They're
they're
still
so
difficult. But like Robert, to your point, worked with Alfonso Cuarón on the development of the script, and it shows. And then great people want to get behind it because Robert's part of the package, and now Sundance is part of the package. And then you're probably going to have a slot in Sundance the year that it's ready to premiere, and then you have a slot in Sundance. Good buyers are going to see it. It's a film of pedigree. So all of a sudden, but Robert was a production designer before he did The Witch, and he spent 3 to 5 years not working and very much dedicated to the film and very close to the edge. And had The Witch not been the tremendous success it was, you could imagine how difficult that path would have been. And good for him.
That's really important. 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay. That process is accelerated if you have an asset, is my point. Because wonderful film, everyone wants to use that film as a case study. My team, I have a 4-person acquisition team. Each week, at least one person comes in and says, I have a movie like The Witch. But you really can't base your success on, the one breakout every 3 or 4 years. You have to look at what's the track record of this particular kind of IP that'll make it transfer to film.
Though to be fair, I'd rather have someone come and say, I have the new The Witch, than someone to come and say, I have the new Coen Brothers movie. Because no one makes Coen Brothers movies that have Coen Brothers.
Yeah, you're talking
and
about
elevated
genre.
genres, actually, there's a real opportunity for it. There's a market for it, and you can do it. You can do it for very little money. And if you do it for very little money and shoot it somewhere interesting where you get remarkable return on your expenditure, so you can make a $3.5 million movie and it costs you $1.5 million in actual cash. Now,
and it doesn't have to be The Witch.
Whatever
it could
it is,
be
yeah.
just a single,
Yeah. Now it's
right?
good business.
And it's still good business.
We've just partnered with a Canadian production company called Black Fawn Films. Any of you guys know Black Fawn Films? We released a movie of theirs called The Sublet in July, and we're taking another movie called Let Her Out into 10 cities in theaters in October. And these are Canadians that don't necessarily take advantage of all the tax stuff. They're just really good, clever filmmakers, and they make genre pictures, to Marty's credit, really stressing that if there's a known genre, there are buyers that'll buy specific genres because they know it works in their marketplace. For me, I partnered with them, and I'm doing an output deal with them because they're really clever filmmakers, and we're buying IP for them to produce. In other words, we're looking at picking up rights to the Reanimator series, other early scary movie series that we can then remake for them. We're also looking at doing a modern-day Frankenstein for them. So when you have a sales agent or a distributor as a partner, we can bring things to you if you've got skills as filmmakers.
Yeah, there was one thing. We used to have a federal incentive, and with the federal incentive that we had, if we partnered with a good state in the United States that had an incentive, whether it's a rebate or a transferable tax credit, and the tax-paying investor was in a 40% tax bracket, you can guarantee the investor a recovery of 75 cents on every dollar. There's no more federal incentive in the United States. But when there was, I happened to be at the Cannes Film Festival, and I happened to be at a producer's breakfast, although I'm not allowed to actually be there because they say executive producers are not producers and you can't come to our breakfast. But I happened to sneak in, and I'm at a global financing table, and there's Guam, there's Northern Ireland, there's England, there's Germany, Italy, and there's 10, and this was on global financing. But in all their conversations, there was nothing about the United States. So I'm sitting there realizing I'm the last person that's going to talk. Guam's going to do a deal with Northern Ireland because of the treaties and all this. So they come to me and they said, so what do you have to say? I said, well, we were very generous with our incentive because 25% of what we spend on any movie can be spent in any of your countries, so go yourself. And I left. The guy from Northern Ireland called me. He said, that was very gutsy for you to do that, and we've been doing business. But it's just, we're not party to that. But you want to find on your team, when you're talking about gap funding or funding, a person or people on your team that even if you don't know the people to go to, that person or person knows the people to go to with good projects. I can tell you I'm very blessed to have friends that on certain projects I would have no hesitation, contacting. But it's got to be that particular project. And yes.
So are you referring to 181 when you say we no longer have it? Or
Right.
So 181 is done.
It is done. Unless you were fortunate enough to do one day of filming from your screenplay with some dialogue before the end of last year. So if you were just piddling around and somehow did one day with some dialogue from your screenplay.
In the United States? Shot it in the United States?
No, it doesn't have to be. Because again, 25% can be spent in any foreign country, and the rules that I helped write for the IRS don't require that one day to be in the United States.
Does it have to be 2016 or could it be previous?
It could be previous. It's been in existence since October of 2004.
And still going now with this requirement?
Yes.
May I bring up something that I have found as a filmmaker, producer is very important. When I speak to finance people, which I do.
Wrap up. So good.
Yes, I think it will be very informative, and I think the rest of the panel can weigh in. Genre, you've all mentioned it. You mentioned hypergenre. It seems that the finance people want horror, action, thriller. They don't want comedy. They don't want
comedy
history.
doesn't sell.
Well,
Form.
so would you guys agree? Horror, action, thriller.
I think there's built-in business in those genres for sure.
You all
Which
agree
allows-
then?
yeah.
those are the hot genres.
Well,
No,
so
you got to add other things. You've got to add family, because people still need to put their kids in front of the TV.
We don't make
and-
family movies.
Okay.
But I'd love to hear that.
Shame on you.
Okay, family.
Yeah. Science fiction. Science fiction's very sellable all around the world. Don't do sports. Don't do stuff that's really obviously not going to travel. Comedy is just not going to travel.
I echo the sports sentiment.
Yeah. So I'm the odd person out because I spent most of my career making literary drama, from Hotel Rwanda and Closing the Ring to Cosmopolis and Maps to the Stars, and so these are tend to be director-driven, larger budget films that nevertheless fall out of the studio system because studios, in some cases, don't know how to deal with them. So we've put those together in these same ways. I will say that recently I've done a couple of genre films, and that's it's kind of fun and freeing, but it's also it's what the market's looking for. Yes.
Sorry, they say
There's a question back there,
the
too.
percentage of equity in the financial plan.
What?
20 to 30.
Percentage of equity.
For what? What's
Percentage of equity in funding. It's not saying
what's the percentage?
equity.
In a finance plan.
About the finance?
When a finance plan can hold between 10 and 30% equity, and it can come from a variety of places. Sometimes you have zero equity. I mean, you have your producer equity, you have sweat equity, you have your deferrals, but I've never seen more than.
Well, when you're doing what Marty's saying and you're pooling all the resources from co-productions and Canadian
Right.
non-American films, if you're getting up to 65%, 70% soft money, and then you could take that 20% that Marty's talking about, or 30%, and you could stick it right on top. You don't really need, the equity is the government money.
In the United States, you pretty much need the
More
whole
equ-
budget.
Yeah.
I mean, or more equity.
Well,
because
that's a different model, for sure.
Then I can go to someone and say, hey, we got 60, 70%, and let's try and close that gap with foreign pre-sales and, I mean, contracts and stuff. But final comment.
There was a question back there, Corky.
Yes. Is there a
Coming
question? No?
I just,
One other point about 181, you also have to declare it on tax.
The first tax return that you file for your movie.
File the tax form and don't declare it,
Then you can be elected president.
That's right.
yeah.
All right, we weren't going to go there. We weren't going to go there.
I'm just,
I
was just anticipating.
Our
No
final
questions,
comment.
I'm
I have
sorry.
one thing that I think is important that you really understand. If you are raising money, equity money for a film, for heaven's sake, raise the marketing money, the P&A money as well at the same time. Because if you're going to people with a movie that's completely finished and has no marketing money, first of all, you're the only product on the planet that does that. Nobody makes a product worth millions of dollars and doesn't have a provision for marketing. But if you go to people and say, I need $2 million to market this movie or put it in 1,000 screens, I need 10 million, then you're going to be behind them and you're not going to get paid back unless you're a massive success. But if you go to a distributor and say, I've got $2 to $3 to $5 million to market this movie, they'll go, great, I'll do a service deal. I'll put it out there for $300,000 or 10% or whatever. And you're more than likely to get your movies in cinemas if you have the marketing money. If you don't, chances are big that you'll go direct to DVD or VOD. So think about when you're raising the money to have a marketing contingent to your budget.
And if you go to VOD, if the title of your movie starts below a D in a letter, you're going to lose 50% or more of your sales.
There's good business on VOD and the ancillaries, especially in the genre space. If you're not going to get that theatrical and you evaluate wherever in the process you make that determination, we've done genre films that have done quite well for us on VOD. And again, it's the idea where you don't have to hit a home run every time, but a single and doing all right on VOD and not spending that money, so you're not sitting behind all the P&A money before you start to recoup overages or your NGs is how you do
Okay,
it.
and final comment.
It's a tough business, and I think you have to make something sometimes that is commercially viable. Not everything that's in your heart to do is commercially viable. So you really have to take that, I think, into consideration.
Martin?
Do what you love.
Jonathan?
Do what Marty does.
My final comment is to do what everyone on this panel does. No, go out there, and there is money in every state and every city in the United States. There are people that love movies, that love to invest in a movie that's going to be filmed in their city or their state. Find someone who knows very rich people in those cities, in those states. So good luck and thank you.
Thank you.